12:05 in the afternoon here on 90.3 FM. It's time for Helping Seniors of Brevard. I'm John Harper, and let's get things going as the music always seems to get people and our guests going, none other than Bill Johnson, our esteemed guest, but Kerry, Fink, we always like airing that music, and it's very appropriate for the show.
Yeah, we call it the music of your life, and John, I'm not kidding. We're still going to have to put together some kind of a Helping Seniors dance or something with all, we'll find a great, one of the classic big bands that can do the songbook, the Great American Songbook, and have a bunch of fun with it.
That would be great. We'll have to continue to kind of talk about that and see what happens.
We'll figure that one out.
Yeah.
Well, meanwhile, though, thank you for welcoming us into another great lunchtime right here on 90.3 FM WEJF Radio. 30,000 watts blasting up and down the entire Space Coast of Florida. And welcome if you're listening from Orlando or even farther south on into Indian River County. This is the radio show, Helping Seniors Radio. We gather around the lunchtime hour Wednesdays, and we like to talk about things that Joe Steckler, who was our founder and longtime president of the Helping Seniors Organization, he always talked about everybody needs to make an aging plan so that we have a good idea of the things that we want to be prepared for as the years accumulate. And one of the things that Joe often talked about was how important it is that everybody needs to look at their own particular situation and make the best plan for them, because everybody's different parameters are different, monies are different, health is different, all those different kind of things. We call it helping you get your ducks in a row. What we're trying to do is get people to think a little bit ahead about some of these things, and the more that you can educate yourself. I remember Joe often talked about the fact that aging is kind of on-the-job training. The best you could do is study for the exams ahead, as it were. And I remember saying to Joe that I think what you mean by an aging plan is much like they mean when they tell us to get a hurricane plan together. We do not want a problem. We want to be prepared to tackle a problem should it come this way. And one of the people who's been so faithful to be side by side helping us in the Helping Seniors journey, going back even before he was helping Joe when Joe was building up Brevard Alzheimer's, his name is Bill Johnson, and he's board certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of William A. Johnson. You know the name because when you picked up your Boomer Guide, right there in the center section, there is a perfectly, I'll call it like a book within a book, but it's a great guide called the Long-Term Care Planning Guide, something similar, Bill?
The Long-Term Care and Nursing Home Answer Book.
Okay, so wasn't too far off. But this is a great resource because, Bill, for as far as I can imagine, decades now, you've been helping seniors and their families navigate all things senior, and there's so much that what you don't know can hurt you, as we've talked about so many times.
Correct. Very, very true.
And so before we get into the bulk of today's program, I want to give you a moment to grab a pencil because you may want to jot down some of the things that we're going to talk about today. One of the things that I do want to make sure you consider for your calendar is, if you recall, we lost Joe. Joe had been on the board literally through his entire life, and he's the guy that founded and created the Helping Seniors Organization. We lost Joe at the end of January. He was the age of 91, and what a great inspiration for all of us. And he said, Kerry, you guys got to keep all this going because there's more work to be done for seniors. And, Bill, I think back 15 years ago when I met Joe, and he was talking about the importance of doing more for seniors in Brevard County, and Lord knows today there's just more and more seniors.
Very true. They just keep making more of them, don't they?
Yeah, I go, people keep turning 65, so that's one aspect. People are just flat living longer, so we have more seniors by accumulation that way. And then the third thing is people just keep moving to Florida, so we get more seniors, all the time. And so today's program is going to be, we're going to dive into some questions about Medicaid. But before we get there, I want to finish this thought about, so we lost Joe at the end of January, and then 2 months later, sadly, we lost his wife, Terry. They had been together. We were at their 50th wedding anniversary. That seems like it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. They were just always two peas in a pod. And anyway, on Saturday morning, 10:30 a.m., we're having a memorial service at their home church, which is the Holy Name of Jesus Catholic Community. It's right there on A1A Beachside. I always say it's kind of like across the street from the Hilton, but it's also right next to that Walmart area right down there where O'Galley comes into A1A. But Holy Name of Jesus, 10:30 a.m., they're doing a mass to honor the lives of Joe and Terry Steckler. And it would be hard to imagine there's a better friend for seniors in Brevard County than Joe has been all these years. He worked so hard to build up the Brevard Alzheimer's, get those Joe's Clubs going, and then 15 years ago he started us off in the Helping Seniors journey, which he said, and I think this is why this radio program is so important, because it's really kind of fits what Joe said. He said what he learned along his journey was so many people have cognition challenges that happen in their family. That's why Brevard Alzheimer's and some great works like that exist. But he said every senior and their families runs into all kinds of questions. We have to be prepared to help them navigate senior years. And Bill, as an elder law attorney, that's one of the things you really do. You can really help people keep their ships off the rocks if they pay attention and do this stuff the right way.
And we can do that ahead of time, or a lot of times we can even do it while they're in the middle of a crisis.
You know, we talked about it. I was making a joke about this the other day. I said to a group of people, I said, I almost think elder law attorneys are probably not the best business people because you spend so much time making yourself available to do educational seminars. You'll do a lot of programs that are absolutely free to the public, like at One Senior Place, and you'll try to get people to start thinking about these questions ahead of time. And that's very cost-effective relative to when they come into your office in the middle of a crisis where now some of the things are just flat off the table. They're just not options anymore, and everything is an expensive option. It takes more time to put into place, so therefore the legal fees could be higher, or they fail to plan, so now probate costs something completely different than what it might have done if you had done your planning properly, or worse yet, you took matters into your own hands, you got an online form or something, and you did it wrong, and now it's going to cost you all this money. And I think about all the money you guys probably end up leaving on the table, because when you help somebody up front, you really are doing a great service for them, but probably not gaining as much money for the law firm as you can. And I'm being somewhat facetious, but you get the point. Like, plan ahead is going to help you a lot.
Correct. If you do some planning now, you save a lot of money on the back end.
Yeah. I mean, Bill, over the years, we've done shows, we've talked about probate, and you were telling me, like, I'm just trying to drive this point home for a second, but you said, like, in a probate, that can cost 3% of the estate can go just directly to the attorney. So if you had like $1 million estate, we would say, which could be like a house, you could have $30,000 just right there.
Correct.
And if you set this up the right way ahead of time, that number could be almost zero.
Right. Probate's voluntary. So, if you don't do any planning, you'll probably end up in probate.
And I think this is so important about the conversation we're about to have about Medicaid, because I have so many questions. And the problem is we keep seeing it in the news, and I think there's a lot of fear out there because we're not sure what the actual outcome is going to be. But I do know this, in the times that you and I have done shows, you also are very adept at helping families prepare. You call it Medicaid planning, and in some cases, as somebody served in the military, even VA planning, because, there's so many things that if you don't know that could really be gotchas. Like we've talked on radio programs before, like, I'm going to sign the house over to my son because that's who's going to get it anyway, and then it becomes a problem because they now do need Medicaid help, and there's look-back periods and all this complicated stuff. And if they would just sit down and talk with somebody with your level of expertise, they could make that whole pathway so much smoother.
They can. And, when you transfer a house to a kid, it also takes your property tax cap off, and your property taxes can triple, and there's all kinds of bad things that can happen. What you don't know can hurt you. And that's why Joe, I think, was always so adamant that we've got to get ahead of this, and we've got to take a minute and study this because, we'll clip a coupon hoping to save, $5 or $10 off of our next meal at a restaurant, but then we'll walk right past something that could maybe mean tens of thousands of dollars to the people we love and care about in our family. Correct.
Yeah.
Very true.
So with that as a backdrop, let's talk Medicaid. Where do you want to begin, Bill?
Well, I just want it's been in the news quite a bit lately.
Yes.
The one big, beautiful bill and the proposed, for lack of a better word, cuts. They kind of phrase it a little differently to the Medicaid program, and somewhere between, $500 billion to $880 billion.
Wow.
And who knows what will happen in the Senate. But AARP recently came out on their website with an article. And, basically a lot of people don't know what Medicaid is. And then they're not familiar with how and what it means for older adults.
Yeah.
So I thought we'd start there, and, most people, Medicaid was created under Title 19 of the Social Security Act of 1965. That's the same act that created Medicare. Mm-hmm. And Medicaid is supposed to be there to be a safety net. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's the last safety net.
Yes.
There's nothing after that. Most of the programs are all means tested, which means they look at your income and assets to see whether or not you're eligible. And usually a lot of them have different kinds of requirements. You have to be a citizen or a green card immigrant. You have to, for Florida Medicaid, you have to be in Florida. So there's some technical requirements, and usually a lot of them also have medical requirements as well. You have to actually be in need of services. There are two main branches of Medicaid, is the way I like to look at it. Uh-huh. There is one branch that deals basically with what we would call health insurance.
Right.
And that covers something like, I think 39% of children in the United States are on Medicaid health insurance.
I was surprised to read that statistic. We're talking about an article. Bill gave me some homework before we got to the studio. He said there's an article ARP has published called What Medicaid Is and What It Means for Older Adults. And that was really surprising to me, Bill, reading through that article, because I guess I didn't really get that so many kids are covered through this program as well.
Yeah, and, in Florida, we call it Florida Healthy Kids Program, and it does cover kids in Florida, and quite a few of them. Also, if you have a injury and you're unable to work at any job, and you qualify for Social Security disability insurance, or actually supplemental security income, SSI, if you qualify for that, you automatically get Medicaid as your health insurance program. There are some people, when you get older, that actually are on some sort of Medicaid program, and they're on Medicare as well, and they're what we call dual eligibles. But so Medicaid has a lot of very far-reaching things. Also, the Affordable Care Act comes into play. And, if you're over 65, and you're thinking about, nursing homes, more than half the people in nursing homes are on Medicaid. It's the largest payer for nursing home coverage. So that's just a general overview. There's really like one half of Medicaid that deals more with health insurance kind of things. And then there's another half that deals more with long-term care. And so just to give you an idea of how in Florida Medicaid can help you, I already mentioned that it can help pay for a nursing home. It can also pay for what we call home and community-based services. Those are services at home or in an assisted living. Also, you can be on hospice under Medicaid. You can be under hospice under Medicare as well. They also have a variety of different programs that help people who have high medical bills. The one that comes to mind is the medically needy program, and it has a little higher asset limit than the nursing home programs. But basically it is, once you expend, for the most part, your income on a hospital bill in a month, then this program comes in and picks up all the rest of the bill. So if you have somebody who has very high medical needs and they're unable to afford those costs, this program can really help them out. They also have programs that help the elderly pay for the premiums on Medicare, as well as some programs that help pay for the premiums and the co-pays. So that helps a lot of people who have low incomes, and you know, if they had to pay the amount for the Medicare Part B premium each month, that wouldn't leave them very much money at the end of the day. Right now, Medicare Part B, if you were to retire now, is $185 a month.
Yeah.
So if you only have a $1,200 Social Security check, that's a big chunk. So there are programs that help people pay for those premiums so that they have more money to keep. There's community care for the elderly that's run out of Aging Matters here locally. So there's a whole variety of programs out there other than the long-term care programs. Another example is there is a program called PACE that we are just getting ready to get set up here in Brevard, where they take a more holistic approach to the dual eligibles and have them come in and basically try to keep them out of the hospitals. So there's a whole variety of programs that can benefit. These programs also, to some extent, vary by state and location. Some programs that, like PACE, for example, is off and running down in South Florida, but we didn't have a program up here, and it looks like within the next year or two we'll have that program. There are certain programs that are only available in certain areas, just by statute, and we don't have that necessarily in Brevard County. So there's a whole variety of programs that, you know, help pay for long-term care for older adults or the people who are incapacitated and, you know, are disabled, and there's a whole variety of programs that also pay for, you know, helping them meet their medical bills, including paying for their Medicare premiums.
You know, as we're having this conversation, I was thinking about one of our, we have several great people who are independent licensed insurance agents that are connected with the Helping Seniors organization. There's a gentleman, his name is Jerry Hadlock. There's a couple of ladies work with an organization called Moore Insurance Solutions. I'm talking about Vicki Moore and Kara Davis. And, you know, I can tell you by experience, Bill, that many of the calls we get on our senior information helpline, which I'm going to give that number so if you want to grab a pencil, that's 321-473-7770. It's 321-473-7770. And, Bill, we take calls all the time from people who are very confused about Medicare and Medicaid, and we as just lay people kind of like tend to just use the words interchangeably. And you sit down and you talk with somebody like Vicki Moore, you know, she's going to explain to you, no, there's quite a difference, and you need to look at each one. And one of the things that we've always talked about in the Helping Seniors world, we say don't try this stuff on your own. There's plenty of great help that's here to help you navigate this stuff. And one of the things that that I know that they talk about is one of their anathemas is that people will see somebody they used to love on TV from their favorite show back in the 70s. He says, oh, call this 800 number, give us your zip code, and we're going to get you all set up with everything. and they, you're calling some nice person in a call center in Kansas or something, and they're going to try to tell you where your doctors are beachside, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't really work. It's better when you can deal with somebody local who's used to what's going on in Florida and what's available and what makes sense. But my point was that so many people just make the assumption. I was reading in this article that we quoted kind of like our source material, what Medicaid is and what it means for older adults. It's an article published by AARP, and there's a quote in here. What a lot of people don't understand is that Medicare is not going to pay for things like long-term care. And what you're talking about, and one of the things we're so excited about, is hearing about stuff like PACE program and all that. But still, Bill, if we don't get ourselves qualified, we still could be harming ourselves no matter what kind of help that we would anticipate we're going to need at some point.
Well, just all those programs I just listed out, most people probably don't know they even exist.
Right.
And that's the first step, is you have to get somebody who knows all the different programs that are out there, and then can look at your situation and see if we can mix and match you into whatever programs you're eligible for.
Bill, not to put you on the spot, but this would be a great article for you to contribute into the Helping Seniors newsletter, because this information is so important. What we understand when we get those calls on the Senior Information Helpline is people just make assumptions, but they haven't done any kind of they have nothing to back it up with. They don't know what's possible and what's not. And the more I'm around people who really know what's going on like you, the more I understand that there are a lot of programs out there, but you have to know how to access them to get the benefit.
Yeah, and also, we have a very transient society here in Florida. And, if you're listening to your neighbor from New Jersey
right.
about what is available under Medicaid, you're not listening to the right person, because a lot of these programs vary state by state.
Yeah.
So when I mentioned that in Florida you can get home and community-based services, that means services delivered to you at your house or at an assisted living facility. If you go to Georgia or Alabama, they don't offer any of that.
Yeah.
And so it really varies a lot by state. The other one is the myth that Medicaid's going to take your house. In Florida, they can't put a lien on your house. They can't touch your house. And as long as you leave it to a family member, they can't touch it even then.
Yeah.
So there is a wide variance between the states on what programs they offer. And we're lucky enough in Florida to have a wide variety of programs that we can offer our seniors.
Yeah, no doubt. We're talking with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of William A. Johnson, PA, and we are going to dig deeper into this topic so that you can become, somewhat of an expert in the things you need to know about Medicaid on the second half of Helping Seniors Radio. We'll be right back.
12:34 is our time right now here on 90.3 FM. The program is Helping Seniors of Brevard. Let's get back to the second half of this afternoon show. And here's your host of the program, Helping Seniors of Brevard, and the executive director of the organization as well, Kerry Fink. Hey, Kerry.
Hey, John Harper, and thank you. It's always great to be on the radio, 90.3 FM, as we continue our lunch hour together midweek every Wednesday right here on 90.3 FM, WEJF. If you're listening online, WEJF.net, thank you for tuning in. And if you're catching this as a podcast later, this is good material. If you missed any of the first part of it, please go back and catch more of this wherever you get a good podcast. Doesn't matter if it's Apple iTunes or, hey, Alexa, play me Helping Seniors Radio or Spotify, iHeartRadio. But we're talking about Medicaid and getting a real good background and education and information from somebody who spends an awful lot of time with this and really advises clients on an individual basis of how to basically make sure that they're going at this the right way. We're talking about board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of William A. Johnson. Welcome back, Bill.
Thank you for having me, Kerry.
So we're reading from an article and talking a little bit, this is kind of a basis for discussion, what Medicaid is and what it means for older adults. This is an article that ARP has published, and there's some stats in here that are phenomenal. 9.2 million adults 50 to 64 are enrolled in Medicaid. That's a huge number by itself. I said 50 to 64. And then when you get to 65 and older, there's 8.2 million adults who have both Medicare and Medicaid. And as we were talking about going into the mid-show break, I said we get calls a lot of times when people use these terms interchangeably. I think I have Medicaid. And so as we ask a few more questions, we kind of get it sorted out. But a lot of us don't really even understand the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. And worse, we can get into lots of problems if we don't plan correctly for Medicaid and the possible need that we might have for Medicaid down the road. That's something that you guys really do help families sort through and figure out a strategy for.
That is correct. Yeah, we do that. A lot of that, actually.
So I want to come back and dig a little bit deeper into a number of things. That during the first half of the show, we talked about the number of different areas that Medicaid can make a difference. Obviously, it could pay for a nursing home under certain circumstances, but there's a lot of programs. Bill was running through a whole list of programs that are possible for the benefit of seniors. I actually asked him, I said, would you write that up so that we could publish that in our Helping Seniors News magazine that we publish, center section of Senior Scene magazine each month, because I think it's very important that we understand all the possible programs that are out there. I remember having the conversation with Joe Steckler years ago. He would say, Kerry, he said, we need more programs for seniors in Brevard County. And I don't think he was wrong about that. But I would also counter and said, Joe, there are a lot of programs out here, but the problem is people don't know that they're there. They're not going to be able to get help, or if they're not understanding how to get suited up correctly to get into the program, it's not going to be a benefit to them. And that's where some of this is important. But before we come back on that, we are hearing a lot about Medicaid in the news, and this article goes on to talk about some potential things that we got to be aware of. And I guess these are just to make people aware of. I don't know that there's much we can do until we see how it shakes out. But they were talking about if some of these changes go through, there could be some challenges for some people who have been hoping to access or have been accessing Medicaid. Maybe we should spend a minute and just kind of cover what's what could be on the block here.
Yeah, in the House bill that passed, one of the things they were talking about is work requirements, and that mainly governs the people who are on Medicaid who are working. Typically, there's a misconception that the people who are getting Medicaid for health insurance are not working, and that is not necessarily the truth. It's just they may be working at jobs that don't pay enough or don't give them health insurance.
Right.
There was a big, huge article a few years ago about Walmart and wages and how they weren't paying their employees enough, and a whole ton of their employees were on Medicaid because they just weren't getting paid enough to be able to afford the health insurance.
Wow.
So, and of course, if you're disabled, you may not be able to work.
Right.
So then you would have to go through some a process to show them that you are unable to do that. Also, if the economy gets into a whack, a recession, usually the elderly employees are the first to go. And now you've got a situation where you're trying to show that you're working 80 hours a week. And, of course, then you don't have a job because you got let go.
Well, that's what this article is going on. It says some of these modifications could cause a domino effect. And they're saying without access to Medicaid, many older adults may not be able to afford home health services or nursing home care when they need them. And they talk about things like, that this is really a safety net in a health crisis. And they quote this, they say more than half of 65-year-olds will need some form of long-term care in the future, according to a 2022 federal study. And even a significant minority of high earners are expected to end up on Medicaid because the cost will have depleted their personal savings. I remember this is a conversation you and I have had many times, because there's a report that you've cited before where you said they interviewed people about what they were concerned about in retirement, and it was always like, where am I going to play golf? Which cruise ship am I going to take next? And someplace you said like 19 or 20 is when people start to say, well, I might need some long-term care. And yet the reality is...
it was, I'm going to outlive my money. Can I sustain my present lifestyle? And then down, I think it was number 10 or 8 or 10 was, I need to, prepare for a long-term care event.
Yeah, and then this article is also quoting that this could put respite care at risk. It says with fewer people having access to Medicaid, caregivers of all ages could find new challenges. And so it really sounds like we have to be like incredibly careful about this because they're talking about example of like what the premium tax credits help with, and they talk about 1 in 10 adults 55 to 64 have no health insurance at all, according to a pre-pandemic study from the National Center for Health Statistics. And it said high price was cited as the main reason for lack of insurance. So there's a lot in all of this. So I'm just hoping you're going to come to the right conclusion with all this. But if we drum it back down to the individuals that, Joe always said we have to do helping seniors so that we're helping individuals here in Brevard County. And you and I have done many radio shows. Like I've asked this question, like, many people are snowbirds. Maybe they reside during the summer times up in, Michigan or something, but then they have a winter home here in Palm Bay. And we've talked about that you have to be careful how you set all this stuff up, because we get some protections here in Florida that might not be available to you, in the state that you came from.
Correct. And, Florida is pretty generous in what they pay for.
Yeah.
You can stay in your house. You don't have to leave. And, 75% of seniors have said that's their one big thing. They want to remain in their house.
So, but this whole concept of getting yourself set up for Medicaid is really, really critical, because you have to do some planning. We talked about this. We've done whole shows where we've talked about things like look-back periods, and people can without even realizing it, kind of like close the door on themselves.
Well, one of the changes they're proposing is that instead of having to recertify that you're eligible every 12 months, you would have to do it every 6 months.
Wow.
Well, I can tell you those recertifications, if you have somebody who's like 85 trying to fill out that paperwork,
it's difficult.
Sometimes it becomes quite difficult. And we've had a whole rash of cases where people have been decertified.
Wow.
And then we have to go back and either reapply or challenge the reason. And sometimes it's just because they have computer glitches at DCF or things like that. And subsequently, or they're incapable of getting their paperwork in because they too are disabled.
Yeah, it's like a whole series of unintended consequences, right? Somebody says, well, this makes sense on its face that we need to make sure there's not waste and fraud. Okay, all that makes sense, but if you're causing somebody to jump through a hoop where they truly are disabled, how are they going to be able to manage that,
Correct, and you're making more hoops for them to jump through.
Wow, yeah.
Which is where they, I think, are going to get the attrition, which will save the program money. That's how they're trying to get the savings.
Wow. So if you're a person that is a senior or approaching seniordom, it really does seem like there's major, major benefits to starting to think about this stuff before it becomes a crisis.
Correct. On the healthcare side, if you are truly indigent and you don't have any money to pay for any health insurance, then you're probably going to be qualifying for Medicaid to cover your basic health insurance needs. Of course, the Affordable Care Act was designed to get those people in the middle ground.
Yeah.
They're not poor enough to qualify for Medicaid, but they're not rich enough to afford the premiums on health insurance. and it was to help subsidize that so they could have health insurance. And then, of course, if you're making plenty of money, then you can pay your own health insurance premiums. So on the healthcare side, that's really what's going on there. And then on the long-term care side, you have to either figure out whether you're going to self-insure, whether you got enough money to pay for these, and you have to know, nursing homes are like $13,000 a month now here in Brevard. Not a lot of people can afford that level of spending for any length of time.
Right.
Are you going to get long-term care insurance to cover the bill? And that's not cheap these days.
No.
Or are you going to look at qualifying for Medicaid?
Yeah.
And you really need to start looking at that and start formulating what is the plan going to be, because there, is a good likelihood that you could have a long-term care event.
One of the things that we've talked about so often is that we're usually victims of just things that we do because we don't know better. We've talked about this, how often you have to get involved because maybe there was a lot of gifting. Somebody said, I'm going to spend down so that I can qualify for Medicaid, not realizing when they gifted whatever they gifted that is actually going to cause a waiting period to accrue because it's not the right way to do it.
Correct. And, any of these programs, if you're gifting or giving money away, they're going to penalize you.
Yeah.
And so you can't just give your money away to become eligible and meet the asset test.
Yeah, I think we're just kind of like spitballing an example. Let's say somebody had $100,000 sitting in a bank account and said, I'm going to, give $25,000 to each child. And that way I have no money, so I qualify for Medicaid. And then isn't the math that when you go and you do the application, then you'll find out that, $100,000 is not.
What they do is they look at all the gifting in the previous 5 years. That's the look back period. 5
years. Catch that. Not just like in the past 20 minutes.
And then they devise it by $10,438.
So now for 10 months, you're not going to have any help.
Correct. So they take the 100,000 divided by basically 10,000. That equals 10 months. That even though you're eligible now, you won't get any services for 10 months.
Which is pretty brutal. So this is why we always say what you don't know can hurt you. Because if you would just sit down with somebody who's adept at understanding all the nuances and how they want these things structured so that it's all proper and legal, then that's why people really need to do this Medicaid planning. And we've even talked about this now with VA planning because they also have a look-back period. So if you are imagining that you might be eligible for VA benefits such as aid and attendance, they're also going to want to see what was going on for a few years before, right?
Correct.
So
yeah, they've got a 3-year look-back.
Yeah, so I want to be sure that we leave people with a sense of hope because there are some techniques that you're able to apply in certain cases, even if somebody has made some of these mistakes. There are certain things that can be put in place to maybe
fix them,
mediate or make it not quite as disastrous.
Yeah, to fix some mistakes or make somebody who's ineligible otherwise eligible.
Yeah.
In Florida, we have a lot of techniques. Again, if you go to different states, some of those techniques aren't available.
Yeah.
So we've been lucky enough to have quite a few here in Florida that we can utilize to make somebody eligible to get Medicaid.
Yeah, this is why having a number in your contact like Bill Johnson, elder law attorney, board certified elder law attorney, can be so valuable. But Bill, when we talk about people who try to self-manage this stuff, maybe they saw an ad on TV and they're going to go out and try to do their own estate planning by clicking a few boxes on their computer. That's also fraught with a lot of danger because you just don't have the training or the skill or the knowledge or the regulations to answer all these things the right way.
True. And you also, like say you're trying to get, services at an assisted living facility. You kind of have to know which facilities take Medicaid, because not all assisted living facilities do.
Yeah, there's a real value in getting that. And that's why we say so often, you know, if we tell people our mission is to help you get your ducks in a row, and we say caveat or corollary number one is don't try this on your own, get some help. But also the corollary number two that we say, Bill, always is don't be an ostrich, don't put your head in the sand, because getting out in front of this is exactly what Joe meant by getting an aging plan. He said, put this stuff, then you're going to have so much peace of mind. It's going to be peace of mind for your family because you're going to already have figured out what makes the best sense given these other things. And that's why, you know, I was kind of teasing you about it at the beginning, but you do spend a lot of time offering these seminars and things where you have an ability to educate the public on things that they need to know. So when they come into your office and say, okay, I'm ready to get this thing going, they already are thinking about the right questions that need to be answered, right?
That is true. That's why I wrote that little book you talked about, too.
Right.
Because it gives people just a basic understanding of how all this works. But, yeah, we do seminars at one senior place, usually twice a month, on estate planning, on Medicaid, are usually the two big topics. Sometimes we mix in VA, aid and attendance, and some other topics. But that's basically the big ones that we hit every month. And if you go to their website, you'll be able to see when the seminars are offered.
Yeah, and also your book is available on your website, floridaelderlaw.net. So if you didn't pick up a copy of Boomer Guide, I know we have them at our Senior Resource Center, Brevard, 1344, South Apollo, 2nd floor. If you come up there and you ask Karen or one of our great volunteers, they'll be happy to get you a copy of Boomer Guide. But in the center section of that, that book is available. But even if you're just at home right now and you can get to your internet, you could go to floridaelderlaw.net, and there's an ability right there to download a PDF copy.
Correct.
Yeah.
Good.
Or they could call your office. What's that number?
321-253-1667.
Bill Johnson, board-certified elder law attorney with William A. Johnson. So, Bill, just in the closing minutes, I want to share a couple of dates, so you might want to grab a pencil and jot down a couple of things that are coming up that we want you to be aware of. We talked at the opening of the show that on Saturday we're going to be honoring Joe and Terry Steckler. 10:30 a.m. at Holy Name of Jesus Memorial Mass is being dedicated to them this Saturday. And so the public is absolutely invited. We would hope that if Joe and Terry have had meaning in your life, so we'll see you there. They're going to do a little reception afterwards. We look forward to seeing you there. Then, as the month goes along, we've got some other exciting things that are coming up. We're always into we call it the fourth Thursday education series, and we do two things right there at the center. From 10 to 12, we do a Knowledge College for Aging, which is our idea about helping you get together on your financial plan or your aging plan, your wellness plan, all those things. And in fact, this time we're going to have Jackie Erickson, who is branch manager, vice president with PNC Bank. And we're going to follow along on this little theme that we've been doing about scam jamming, trying to keep our seniors safe from all those nefarious things that are out there. And as a branch manager and vice president for PNC Bank, she sees the ugly stuff that can be out there. So she's going to share with us on safe banking for seniors, and she's going to talk a little bit about keeping your identity safe in this kind of a world that we live in. And then at 11 we're talking about Thursday, June 26th, because that's actually the fourth Thursday, at Joe's Senior Resource Center, we do the Wellness Series. And so each month we'll bring somebody in who can bring us a lot of expertise on the number one thing in your aging plan, which is let's stay as well as we can. So lots of good things. We're also in the middle of car raffle season, because on October 26th, go ahead and get that Sunday afternoon marked on your calendar. We know where you want to be. It's at the American Muscle Car Museum, 3500 Sarno Road. That's that terrific collection that Mark Pylock has built, and it keeps growing. He's up to somewhere around 500 cars now in the museum, and it has now become the home ever since he's opened the museum for our Helping Seniors car raffle. And so on Sunday afternoon, October 26th, somebody is going to go home in a brand new car. and we're really excited about that, John Harper.
We are. There's a lot of excitement already starting to build on that, Kerry, Fink, and people are anticipating the great opportunity that they will have to be able to win one of those cars. It's been a great success for the winners. It's been a great success for the organization now over the past 8 years.
This is going to be we've done 8. This is going to be our 9th. Can you imagine?
Yeah,
wow.
That's incredible. 2 years ago, when we had the event on Saturday night at the Muscle Car Museum, and there were so many people in attendance, that was kind of crazy, because word got out that we were doing this, and got out in a big way. And we had a lot of people show up, and we hope that we'll be able to experience that again.
Yeah, well, that's what we're going for. That's why we moved, by the way, the whole event to a Sunday afternoon event. Family-free. Kids get to go in with the adults into the museum. We're going to have a huge car show out there. We're doing a thing called the Brevard Adventure Village. You're going to be hearing a lot about that. But the main element is that everybody gets to pick the car that they wish to win. They all come from Boniface Hires car dealerships, family of car dealerships. Now, AJ has one of almost every car dealer that really matters. Last year, our winner, Jim Newman from Cocoa, he decided he was going to go home in a Chevrolet Colorado pickup truck. So that's what he went home in. The year before, our winner, Diane Pelak, chose the Mitsubishi Outlander. So there are 7 great cars. I wanted to ask Bill Johnson, do you have a car that you prefer? I'm going to list them out.
Bill is a car enthusiast.
Yes, he is. And so let me run over the choices. You could choose that Chevrolet Colorado truck if you're into that mode. We have a Jeep Compass Sport, a little 4x4 that's kind of fun. We have the Mazda 3, which is an elegant little sedan that you can go tooling around in. If you're sort of a racing bent, they have a thing called the Dodge Hornet, which is fast and just a fun little car to drive. And then they have got also if you like the little roadster, we've got the Mazda. We've got the Mazda Miata. That's a little convertible you can tool around in. And then to kind of round it out, there's a Kia Sportage, and I think I mentioned the Mitsubishi Outlander, which are great little 4x4s. Bill, what do you like? What sounds good to you?
Probably the Outlander.
The Outlander, that is a fine car. They send us out a lot these days, and they send us out in this like really cool red one, and it does gain a lot of attention. How about you, John?
I think I might consider the Jeep.
Jeep, yeah, that's fun. That's fun. How about you, Jim Votro?
The most expensive one.
Well, now, listen, we're a charity, so our rules go, you get the base model, and then you can upgrade from there. They're all like $35,000 cars this year, so I don't know. It's a tough call because it's just so many great choices.
They're great choices. It is a tough call for the winner to make.
Yeah, so get your tickets today. Let me tell you real quick how to do it, and then we got to go. 321-473-7770. You're going to be able to call for tickets, or you can go to helpingseniorscarraffle.com. Ogle all the great choices that are there. Get your tickets right online and be in it to win it, the Helping Seniors Car Raffle. So that's the time we have for today.
It's going to be a great event.
It's going to be fun.
Looking forward to it. All right, Kerry, have a great week. We will see you on the radio next week. Bill Johnson, thanks for being with us. And we'll say goodbye for now.
See you then.